Ще раз дякую всім, хто підключився. Я пропоную починати і хочу запросити до вступного слова Михайла Олексійовича Теплюка, заступника керівника Апарату Верховної Ради України і керівника Головного юридичного управління. Михайло Олексійович.
Дякую за надане слово. Шановні пані та панове, я перш за все хочу висловити вдячність програмі «Рада. Нове покоління», а також колегам із парламенту Чорногорії за ту можливість, яка сьогодні є у нас, почути про той досвід, який має парламент Чорногорії в питаннях євроінтеграції. Питання євроінтеграції для України не є новим на сьогоднішній день, проте прийняте 23 червня 2022 року Європейською Радою рішення про надання Україні статусу кандидата в членство в Європейському Союзі відкриває нову сторінку у роботі органів державної влади України в плані виконання зобов'язань, міжнародно-правових зобов'язань в сфері євроінтеграції. І, безперечно, для парламенту надзвичайно важливим це забезпечення такого виконання важливого завдання, точніше, це мова йде про інструмент виконання міжнародно-правових зобов'язань в сфері євроінтеграції, як адаптація законодавства України до законодавства Європейського Союзу. І підтвердженням того, що парламент України усвідомлює всю відповідальність, яка покладається саме на парламент як єдиний орган законодавчої влади, є, зокрема, ухвалена у п'ятницю, це 3 дні тому, постанова Верховної Ради про деякі заходи щодо виконання зобов'язань України в сфері європейської інтеграції. Хочу зразу сказати про те, що ця постанова з одного боку є свідченням того, що парламент усвідомлює свою відповідальність за адаптацію законодавства України до законодавства Європейського Союзу, а з іншого боку парламент прагне створити такі механізми, які б забезпечили високий рівень адаптації і виконання тих зобов'язань, які взяла Україна на себе, підписуючи перш за все угоду про асоціацію і подаючи заявку на надання статусу кандидата на членство в Європейському Союзі. Якщо проаналізувати цей крок парламенту, то парламент хоче серйозно ускладнити з одного боку процедуру проходження законопроєктів, які стосуються адаптації законодавства України до законодавства Європейського Союзу, а з іншого боку створити механізми, які б гарантували належну імплементацію директив Європейського Союзу в законах України. І саме в зв'язку з цим сьогоднішня зустріч є надзвичайно важливою, адже такі зустрічі дозволяють почути, побачити ті корисні речі, які мають місце в практиці роботи парламентів інших країн, які або пройшли шлях кандидатства на членство в Європейському Союзі, або вже впродовж певного періоду виконують завдання на шляху до членства в складі у Європейському Союзі. Сподіваюсь, що сьогоднішня зустріч буде корисною і той досвід, який корисний, який має парламент Чорногорії, він буде використовуватись в процесі діяльності парламенту, українського парламенту та апарату українського парламенту. Безперечно, виконання Верховною Радою України завдання з адаптації законодавства України до законодавства Європейського Союзу, це завдання не може бути вирішено самою Верховною Радою і депутатським корпусом. І в цьому плані надзвичайно важливо, щоб апарат Верховної Ради також підставив плече парламенту на цій дорозі, у процесі виконання цього важливого завдання. Сподіваюся, що сьогодні ми також почуємо, а яка ж роль апарату парламенту Чорногорії у сприянні депутатському корпусу у виконанні тих завдань, які стоять перед парламентом Чорногорії на шляху до Європейського Союзу. Я ще раз хочу подякувати всім, хто причетний до організації цієї зустрічі. Хочу подякувати пані Марії Мілошевич, яка згодилась на те, щоб сьогодні поділитись своїм досвідом саме як член Комітету з питань євроінтеграції Парламенту Чорногорії. Дякую за увагу. Бажаю нам вдалої, ефективної співпраці, дискусії з тим, щоб досвід, про який йтиметься, був максимально корисно використаний у роботі і парламенту України, і його апарату. Дякую.
Дякую, Михайло Олексійовичу, за вступне слово. Від імені програми скажу коротке вступне слово. Це вже не перша зустріч, організована програмою USAID Рада «Наступне покоління» на тему європейської інтеграції. Ми вже мали зустріч з представниками Хорватії, Боснії та Герцеговини. Сьогодні ми дякуємо нашим партнерам з парламенту Чорногорії, що зголосились взяти участь та провести з нами ці 2 дні. Коротко про план нашої роботи. Цей семінар розрахований на 2 дні, розбитий на 2 короткі секції для зручності учасників. Сьогоднішня зустріч буде присвячена темі «Роль парламенту в процесі вступу до ЄС». Це більш загальна тема. І завтра ми поговоримо більш детальніше про роль Комітету з питань європейської інтеграції в переговорному процесі. Формат нашої роботи простий. Я передам зараз слово нашим колегам з парламенту Чорногорії, Марії Мілошевич та Марії Мараш. Вони коротко представлять себе і почнуть презентацію, після чого в нас буде блок запитань та відповідей. Ми попередньо збирали запитання під час реєстрації до заходу, але якщо в процесі презентації у вас виникають питання, ви можете або писати їх в чат, або після презентації підняти руку, або будь-яким іншим чином просигналізувати, що ви хочете задати питання, і задати питання усно. Нагадую, що в нас забезпечується переклад заходу, тому задавати питання ви можете будь-якою мовою, якою вам зручно. І нагадую, що щоб вимкнути переклад, на панелі Zoom оберіть мову, яку ви хочете чути. Презентація буде англійською мовою, але сам текст презентації перекладений, ви будете бачити на екрані. Дякую за увагу і передаю слово пані Марії Мілошевич і пані Марії Мараш. Прошу.
Hello, everyone. Hope that we are okay. I have a presentation in Ukraine. Okay. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to share with you our experience in Montenegrin EU path, but nothing will happen without my colleague, Committee Secretary Marija Marаш. So I'm very glad that both of you together will present our main steps we did so far on our EU path. We are working together for 7 years in the Secretariat of European Integration Committee. And as I said, we are very happy to help, to support you. And in the end of this 2 days meeting, you will have our contacts, so you can ask everything you need anytime from now on, and if we will may help you, we will be very happy to do that. Now I'll just try to find my presentation in English, because it's a little bit confusing to look. Okay, here it is. So today we will talk about the role of Parliament in the EU process, and tomorrow we will focus on the role of European Integration Committee in the process of European integration. First of all, a little bit at the beginning, a little bit of history of the European Union-Montenegro relation. So you know that citizens of Montenegro voted for independence in 2006. Before 2006, we already confirmed our EU path. In 2003 with the Thessaloniki agenda. It was a confirmation of European Union vision of whole Western Balkan countries. In 2007, we signed stabilization and association agreements, and 1 year after that, we submitted application for EU membership. After that, we got the questionnaire. Had a lot of obligation to fulfill and questionnaire, and we took 1 year to get the status of EU candidate country. So this is the bulk, because this actually is your phase now. And 2 years after we granted status of EU candidate country, the negotiation with EU has begun. Screening process was completed 1 year after we began negotiations with European Union, and we are still in negotiation process. So far, we open all chapters. So among 35 chapters, Montenegro negotiates up on the 33. All chapters are open, and 3 of 33 are provisionally closed chapters. So in comparison, for instance, with Croatia, our negotiations took a much more time, because Croatia did its job in 7 years, and we are still waiting to get the green light for the obligations we already fulfill. So it's always the issue on the one hand, opinion that European integration actually is a process that it has a political dimension and technical dimension. So you always have to wait the approval of all EU candidate states to not only to see your result, but to be sure that you are ready for the EU standards. Institutional framework of European integration in Montenegro is actually based on governmental and parliamentary level mainly, but government is the one who is responsible for all. So on behalf of the government, now we have Ministry of European Affairs. Before we have the Office for European Affairs, which was the office next to the cabinet, the Prime Minister's cabinet, and now we upgraded in a sense that now we have the ministry who is also responsible for the European affairs, as well as regional cooperation and foreign affairs. And on the parliamentary level, we actually have our committee, so European Integration Committee is the one who is responsible for oversight the whole process. So government is responsible, and Parliament has the role to oversee the process. Because of this kind of, let's say, division of work, it's very, very important to have the government and Parliament who cooperate, rather than that you have a Parliament and government who are, let's say, in a relation of, let's say, competition. In Montenegro, we are very lucky because all political subjects are agreed on the Montenegrin EU path. So we have consensus among all political parties and very high support of EU, hopefully EU citizen, but now Montenegrin citizen, it's circa 80% per EU membership, and that is very significant advantage in the overall integration. Montenegrin institutional framework for European integration in practice, it's look like so on the top we have the government who is responsible for all. On the governmental level, there is a college for negotiation on accession of Montenegro to the European Union, and state delegation of Montenegro for negotiation on accession of Montenegro to the European Union, and rule of law council. So there is all a level of ministries. We had Office of Chief Negotiation for negotiation on accession of Montenegro to the European Union. Now we have the Ministry for European Integration. Under the ministry, the negotiation structure is composed of negotiation group for the accession and 33 working groups. And of course the secretariat of the negotiation group. So inside of the working groups there is employees, so it's a technical level, and there are employees from different ministries, line ministries, in relation, I mean, ministries related to the chapter or EU field, and that's the governmental level. Besides the governmental level, there is a parliamentary dimension of the whole process. We have a committee on European integration, who is the main body on parliamentary level, who oversee the negotiation process. And we also have line committees. We will talk much more later on that. Line committees who are not directly, but indirectly also involved in the parliamentary oversight of the European integration process. So regarding the legal basis, we have constitution, on Montenegro, which confirms Montenegrin EU path, then rule of procedure of the Parliament of Montenegro, and very well to hear that your Parliament signed the resolution. We had 4 key political documents adopted. So Declaration on Accession to the European Union from 2005, then Resolution on the Fulfillment of Obligation of Montenegro with the Stabilization Association Agreement from 2008, the resolution of necessity of accelerating the process of integration of Montenegro into European and Euro-Atlantic structures from 2008, and the resolution of the manner, quality, and dynamic of the process of the integration of Montenegro into the EU. The last one is very important because the main mandate of our committee is actually based on this resolution together with the rules of procedure. So Article 15 within the Constitution of Montenegro says that Parliament decides on the manner of accession to the European Union, and Article 209 rule of procedure, assembly and standing committees cooperate with the parliamentary assemblies. For instance, the relevant working bodies of the parliamentary assemblies of international organizations and other international structures in order to fulfill the role of the Parliament in the process of European and Euro-Atlantic integration. So rule of procedure in this article actually confirmed Montenegrin will and interest to cooperate with international organization. And in the end, Article 42A is the main who specifies the mandate of European Integration Committee as a key parliamentary body to monitor European integration process. Regarding the key roles of the Parliament, it functions through the European Integration Committee and partially so to some extent line committees. It has political role. Political role performed in monitoring of the process and parliamentary oversight. It has legislative role, so actually the main job within the negotiation process or overall process of European integration is aligning Montenegrin or national countries' law to EU law. So it's all about harmonization process and how to achieve the EU standards. And in the end, social role, it's a kind of, let's say, creative part of the job. So you have the task to maintain the support of the citizens for EU membership. So you should have activities in order to communicate with the citizen and in order to promote European Union values and standards. Key roles of the European Integration Committee is monitoring or parliamentary oversight, parliamentary diplomacy. It's very important role, especially in, let's say, second phase of the negotiation process, but when you have to communicate with the EU member states to convince them that your results actually are valuable, and in the end, of course, promotion and information on communication on EU issue. Monitoring. So ongoing European Integration Committee discuss on reports on overall activities within the process of Montenegro's EU integration. So it does quarterly and semi-annual, and semi-annual to be is the only document that is discussed at the plenary level. Montenegro's EU accession programs and quarterly reports on the implementation of this obligation from this national program is very important document. It is composed on it's like a plan of each draft law and any law that has to be in line with EU law, and in the end, annual information on EU support programs for Montenegro regarding EU pre-accession funds. In previous phase, Committee on European Integration main job was to discuss the draft negotiation positions. So government was responsible for the negotiation. Governments prepared the negotiation position of Montenegro together with the European Commission, but without approval of the European Integration Committee, nothing will happen. So before ministry, before chief negotiator go to the Brussels to negotiate, he came to the committee to get the approval of committee members, and then after he got the approval, then he can negotiate with the representatives of European Commission. The other issue in monitoring phase was the activities of line committees in Montenegrin case. So 8 committees participate in parliamentary oversight of the accession process. These are the 8 committees. So committee deals with the political system, justice and administration, security and defense committee, committee on international relations and diaspora, committee on economy, finance and budget, committee on human rights and freedoms, gender equality committee, committee on tourism, agriculture, ecology and spatial planning, committee on education, science, culture and sports, and committee on health, labor and social welfare. So all of them try to monitor the extent of how draft law is harmonized with the directives, regulations, and other resource of EU law, and monitor and assess harmonization of the Montenegrin laws with the EU acquis. So for each draft law considered at meetings of these committees, the secretariats of committees prepare the briefing paper containing an assessment of compliance of a proposal for the law with the EU acquis. This is probably the most complex issue because there is a lot of regulation and directives that is introduced on a daily basis, and all of them candidate countries should discuss on and should try to harmonize by introducing the national law. The European Integration Committee is excluded. In this process, we find this as a very, I have to be honest, negative impact, because European Integration Committee is not actually involved in legislative procedure, and once we become the EU member, that will become our daily work. So it's very challenging, and our advice is to European Integration Committee to be involved in this harmonization process together with the Line Committee, because it's very complex issue, and it's an issue of shared responsibilities. It's an issue that depends on government and parliament cooperation, because it's together work, and it requires high capacities. Since we are a small parliament, we are a small administration. It's a very challenging. This issue is very challenging for us. Now I will try to get close to the cooperation between Parliament of Montenegro and the European Parliament. It's confirmed with the rules of procedure, Article 209. The Parliament of Montenegro and European Parliament cooperate at regular intervals through Stabilization and Association Parliamentary Committee. So it's a together committee set up on entering into force the Stabilization and Association Agreement in 2010. So after we granted the country the status of country candidate, program of support of the European Parliament for countries of Western Balkans and Turkey. So we became a part of program who introduced study visits, seminars, and fellowship program. This fellowship program for employees, for parliamentary staff, it's very valuable. I was a part of this program in 2019, and I worked together with EP colleagues. I learned a lot. I learned how they actually prepare all the materials for MPs, and we are all actually worked together. I prepared the plenary session of the European Parliament, and it's very great experience. And participation at joint meetings and conference organized with the presidency of the European Union is also one of the platforms of cooperation that can be useful. But let's say that this is mainly with the named to members of the parliament, not for the parliamentary staff, but it's also let's say a kind of networking. You have opportunity to network with the colleagues from the other parliaments, regionally or from Parliament of EU member states. I will focus on our mutual committee, so Committee of Montenegro, Parliament of Montenegro and European Parliament. So it was agreed, the legal basis of this functioning of this committee is Article 12 of Stabilization and Association Agreement, and Article 125 establishment. Set up the committee set up in June 2010, and it's regulated by rules of procedure of the committee. So the committee has its own rules of procedure, and it's composed on 14 members on the parliamentary of Montenegro on one side and 40 members of the European Parliament on the other. We have 2 meetings per year. We are gathering in Brussels or in Strasbourg, depending on where the European Parliament is settled, and session of the European Parliament is settled, and in Podgorica. So far we had 20 meetings. It's a very good opportunity to gather the MPs from both levels, from the level of the Parliament of Montenegro and the European Parliament, to discuss on the main topic from the EU path. It's always about environmental issue, human rights issue, corruption and organized crime issue, etc. And it's a very good opportunity to see where you are actually in the process of European integration, and to get a feedback from the colleague of the European Union, to just to gain the main to get the main messages and the main let's say guideline for the future steps you should take. And in the end of each meeting, MPs from both sides signed a joint declaration with all recommendations. Sorry about that. Regarding the program of support of European Parliament, we are involved in this program since 2010. We organize circa one study visit per year, study visit to European Union institution. We have few seminars per year on different topics regarding the EU fields linked to the negotiation chapters. And we have this fellowship program. 2 employees of the Parliament have the opportunity to stay and work in the European Parliament every year. And of course, all is settled in cooperation with the Directorate General for External Policy of the Union. So it's the Office of the European Parliament, and my warm recommendation to get close to our colleagues in European Parliament, because they really can help you. Meetings within the presidency of the EU, it's a platform of cooperation, let's say, rather for member states, or it's cooperation on political level. It's COSAC. We have plenary sessions and chairpersons. COSAC is Conference of European Affairs Committees of Member States of the European Parliament. They are gathering at the beginning of the presidency and in the end of the presidency. It discusses on EU issues that are in focus. They also have conference of common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy, conference of speakers of the parliament, speakers of the parliaments of EU member states, and thematic conference within presidency due to 6-month priorities. So each country that holds presidency of the EU has its own priorities, and regarding these priorities, whether it's economy, digital agenda, environmental policy, they organize the conference in their countries. At all these platforms of cooperation, communication, and networking, Montenegro has the status of observers since we are a candidate country. Regarding the outcomes from the EU level discussed within the Parliament, we discuss the outcomes on committee level. So on behalf of the European Commission, we discuss on its annual reports on Montenegro, since we granted the candidate country status. And on behalf of the European Parliament, we discuss on annual EP reports, resolutions on reports on Montenegro European Commission. They are very useful documents because we got all recommendations, we got actually all, we have, it's like, what's in it? Assessment, we gained the main assessment, and we actually know what we should do in the future to get the green light and to fulfill the obligations that we have to. We also have unofficial working documents, non-papers, of European Commission on the situation in chapters 23 and 24. You know that the first change after Croatia accepts to the EU, and after we began the negotiation process, was that chapters 23 and 24, which are dedicated to fight against corruption and organized crime and rule of law. If we do not make any efforts in these two chapters, we will not get the green light for any other chapters. So it's not directly discussed, but to some extent we also discussed this issue, because this is actually the main issue that the whole negotiation process depends on. These documents determine the overall dynamics of the negotiation process and are considered as guidelines for future steps within the process. And instead of endnotes, these are some lessons learned. We hope that you will find it useful. First of all, legal documents out of date should be regularly updated. So even though we adopt resolutions and declarations that are actually political documents, it's very hard to amend them, and we have when I say we, I mean on the level of parliamentary staff, we have a problem to convince MPs to amend them because they are out of date, and we cannot function in accordance with them. But it's a lesson learned, and we find it very challenging. Better coordination among line committees and European Integration Committee within the harmonization process. It's very important because harmonization process is very complex and it takes a lot of time, and it requires high capacities, and coordination and communication in this field is really very priceless. More discussion at the plenary issues. If you have a discussion on committee, it's not as much visible as it should be on the plenary level. So our advice is to have a lot of, I mean, not a lot of, but at least one discussion or two discussions per year on some EU issue. Better communication, rather formal or informal, between parliamentary and governmental bodies involved in the process, because all depends on the coordination and communication regarding between employees from the government and parliamentary, because we don't have any any legal act who actually determine the cooperation. So it depends on personal communication and cooperation. Automatic membership of members of the European Integration Committee together committee, Skupština Crne Gore, Parliament of Montenegro, and European Parliament. Harmonization process to be mandates of both European Integration and Committee and line committees. I already mentioned this. It's our warm recommendation to do so. And centralized parliamentary diplomacy. Parliamentary diplomacy, as I said before, it's very important in the second phase of negotiation, in a phase of convincing the member states in your job. I hope that you understand me. And now I'm ready for your questions. Please do not hesitate to ask whatever you want, and hopefully I wasn't so confused. So I'm happy to hear your comments.
Дякую дуже. Ми переходимо до сесії запитань та відповідей. Я бачу, що вже підняв руку пан Сергій Кальченко. Прошу.
Dear Madam Mілошевич, thank you very much for your presentation. At the beginning of your intervention, you mentioned the constitutional level. You specifically touched upon the issue of constitution. So my question pertains to possible amendments of a constitution if such issues were discussed internally on a national level or during the course of your negotiations in Brussels with the European Commission or other EU institutions. I mean, was it on agenda such issues like amending your constitution with regard to a need for transfer of authority or delegation of some authority from national bodies to the e-bodies, or joint exercise of some authorities with in cooperation with EU bodies? These issues were on the agenda when some other states like Baltic states, Central European states were in the process of joining the European Union. And also, did you discuss the issue of amending constitution with regard to the supremacy of the EU law, community law, regarding the national laws and the law regulations? How did you deal with, for instance, the rights of EU citizens living in Montenegro regarding the electoral rights to vote and to stand for local elections and elections to the European Parliament? Did you amend your constitution, or you are still discussing, or maybe there is no need to amend the constitution? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So far we haven't discussed on that. I mean, MPs haven't discussed on that. Regarding the EU issue, in accordance with Constitution, we have only this obligation that Parliament will decide on how Montenegro will join to the EU. Any other issue is confirmed by national law, not by Constitution. But in general, amending documents, even declaration and political and resolutions on EU issue is very hard. Можешь.
I hope you hear me.
Sorry. I'll recommend.
Yeah, I guess you have issues because you're in the one room, and that's why you have problem with the audio. So, yeah, it would be better. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, so I just wanted to add one thing regarding the changes to the constitution. So in the beginning, so in the first phase of the negotiations, we had the obligation to amend the constitution with regards to how we select some of the key judicial positions. So some of the key judicial positions have to be voted in the parliament with qualified majority, which means 2/3 majority, or if not possible to reach the 2/3 majority in like 2 votings, then in the third one, we can vote it with 3/5 of majority. So this is what we had to amend in the constitution. I think it was the condition for opening the negotiations in the beginning. So it was in the first phase, so it was 2011-12. So like in the first phases of the process itself. So once that was done, then we opened the negotiations, and so we voted these key judicial. So there is a downside to this. So we voted this in that first wave of, let's say, optimism and enthusiasm about the integration. So what is happening now? Now we have troubles to select some of the key officials in the judicial positions because we don't have that qualified majority, which is demanded by the constitution. So that was I think the purpose of these changes in the beginning was to have, let's say, better consensus and more unified forces for some key decisions. So for Montenegro, the EU adopted like the new, let's say, innovative approach of putting in the central position the rule of law chapters 23 and 24, which had to be opened first and which will be closed the last. So from the beginning of the process, what the European Commission and EU said is these chapters, rule of law, will decide on the dynamics of the integration. Then during the years, it was first the diplomatic words of the EU. So it will decide on the dynamics. And then over the years, it became more clear and more like clearly stated from the EU level that these will be the conditions to continue the negotiations, to close the chapter. So now in this phase for the last 2 years, so the European Commission is saying loud and clear, and even writing in the European Commission report clearly that the chapters 23 and 24, the rule of law, will impact the closing of the chapters. So even though we have 6-7 chapters at least ready to be closed, ready in terms of technical level, standards, legislation, and everything, we cannot close it before we progress on the rule of law. So judiciary and these key positions were also a part of the rule of law package. So these are the amendments we had to do to the constitution. From that phase, which was 10 years ago or even more, nothing happened in terms of the constitution.
Дякую за відповідь. Наступне питання. Колеги, ви можете піднімати руку, задавати питання в чаті, як вам буде зручно. Наступне питання з тих, які задавалися під час реєстрації. You covered in your presentation mostly all questions. So...
Sorry, we can't hear you.
And right now? And right now, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So you covered in your presentation mostly all questions, so it's hard to that we preliminarily collected. So okay, let's start with that's one. Does your parliament have a special fast-track procedure for passing European integration bills or governmental decisions?
We do not have a fast track, but in comparison with the other parliaments, decision process is much more simply in Parliament of Montenegro than in comparison with the Croatian parliament. So the facts of the fast track in Croatian parliament is the regular decision adoption in parliament. So we have discussion, so draft law enters in the parliamentary procedure, then it goes to line committee. We have discussion on committee level, and after draft law is adopted at the committee level, it is passed to the plenary. At the plenary, we have two readings. One reading is in discussion in general, and the second reading is discussion on amendments, and after these two discussions, if the law will be adopted or rejected. So we do not have three readings on the plenary after the committee, the discussion of the committee level. So that's it. Once they agree the draft law on the plenary is in these two readings, the draft law will be adopted or rejected.
Дякую. Thank you. Прошу, Сергій Панченко.
Maria, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. And as I understood, I'm representing the Ministry for Strategic Industries of Ukraine. And as I understood, you have a separate body in the executional branch of power in your country. So that's a Ministry for European Integration.
Yeah.
And I also understand very clear that it wasn't possible to make a decision for creation of such a body without Parliament. So my question is, what was the main reason to create a separate body for the European integration in your government, and probably how can you see a future of this body? Is this body on a permanent base? Is this body will be existing in the future, or on the same on a certain stage you will stop the functionality of this body, so you will stop this ministry, the activity of this ministry? Am I clear? Okay, thank you. Thank you
for your question. Well, we actually have changed negotiation structure from time to time. At the beginning, we have Ministry on European Integration, on European Affairs. And the ministry was at the same time the chief negotiator. After, in the next government, we have Office on European Integration, which was linked to the Prime Minister Cabinet. So for some for some political subject that was putting the European integration issue on the lower level, actually on the technical level. And in this new government, we actually again had the Ministry on European Affairs. We have minister who is just a minister, not chief negotiator, but just a minister, and it's all about political responsibility. Now, the Ministry on European Integration is also Vice President of the government for Foreign Affairs, Regional Cooperation and European Integration. So political responsibility is now higher, and that is because in this phase of negotiation process, it's all about convincing European Union in our results. So it's all about the diplomacy and political responsibility. So according to this phase, politicians had the opinion that it will be better to have a separate body in comparison with the office we had in previous time.
Can I just add for the beginning of the negotiation? So what was the logic to have a separate institution? First, that institution was in charge of the negotiating structure. So it was coordination and technical issues as well. So as Maria told you, for every chapter, we have a working group and negotiator for the negotiation chapter. So in that ministry, which was ministry, then the office, then the ministry again. So just the name changed. So the structure in itself just slightly changed, but nothing crucial. So it was the same from the beginning, like the core structure. So that institution dealt with these working, so they had the secretaries of the working groups. So it had the coordination, it had the chief negotiator. So it had the overall coordination of the process. So that was one thing for the negotiations. The second thing that was in charge of, and is still in charge of, is the EU funds. So pre-accession assistance, so-called instrument for pre-accession assistance, IPA, which is aimed for the candidate states. Now it's been used by the Balkans and the Turkey. So it's very significant. So it's basically EU giving you not 100% of the money for the projects, key projects, but 85%. So it's co-financing both infrastructural and also cross-border cooperation projects and some smaller, let's say, soft projects in our country. So that institution also was the coordinator of these funds. So it has the main, so every ministry has, to some extent, is in charge of negotiating certain chapters and using certain EU funds. But this ministry has the core coordination of the entire process. So I think it was the good decision, because if you have it decentralized from the beginning, the coordination wouldn't be very functional. So, and hopefully, to answer also the second part, whether it's going to be dissolved. So hopefully it will cease to exist when we enter the EU. So when we enter the EU, then each ministry will take over the responsibilities. So I think until we enter the EU, there is always going to be something like this, either ministry or the office. Because if you look at the structure, it changed, I think 5 times, it changed names. But it's not the same people. Unfortunately, many people left. So we have these fluctuation of administration, which is also a big issue. But the structure is the same, whatever the name may be.
So let me take to the bottom. You are going to keep this ministry or probably office even after you entering the after you leave the candidate status and will become a member of EU. It's
No. It will. I don't think we will have Ministry for European Affairs. Probably other ministries will take over for each area. So it depends what we're going to do with the EU funds. So the EU funds, when we have the membership, then you have access to large funds, especially in our case, we will be underdeveloped compared to the EU average. So, but then it depends. I think the funds will be the strategic decisions, what to do, where to put it, the coordination, but everything else, the negotiations and everything will end. So every ministry will be in charge of their own EU policy, let's say.
Thank you guys for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is connected with your previous answer. You mentioned that Ministry of Foreign Affairs is responsible for coordinating donors program. And on the level of the Parliament, do you have a special unit, or maybe the Committee on European Integration is responsible for these funds and programs, or only ministry is responsible? How it works in your Parliament?
So for the EU funds, the Ministry of European Affairs is dealing with the coordination of, with cooperation with line ministries and institutions. So because projects are different from different areas, different phases, the key coordination is in the Ministry of European Affairs. Now we have, for some EU programs, EU funds, our Ministry of Finance can do the contracting of the projects. So we have some kind of decentralization with the EU. But in the Parliament, so we can only monitor and organize consultative hearings about what is going on, where the money is going, how it's spent, what is the state of the administration, what is the structure. So our committee, European Integration Committee, has like annual hearings about, we have annual reports about how the funds, EU funds have been used. So our minister comes to the committee sessions, they present the report, and then our committee usually organizes additional meetings, sometimes with the local governments, to talk to them about how they are, whether they are using the EU funds and how. Then we can organize some kind of thematic sessions. Now, this year we will have 3, like for funds for agriculture, funds for the local governments, and this new IPA framework for the next 7-year period. So when the EU budget is adopted, it has 7-year also budget for this EU pre-accession assistance. So we always have IPA allocated, and we have new documents, strategic documents regulating how it will be used, what will be the rules, how much money each country will get, for what will be the priorities. So it is all decided every 7 years. So every 7 years, there is new strategy developed. But it's similar, the priorities can change, but the structure is more or less the same. So we can only monitor, give recommendations, we adopt some kind of committee conclusions about different aspects. We can organize sessions, we can increase maybe the visibility, we can do some promotional activities to make the topic more closer to the citizens, but we cannot take any decisions. So the Parliament doesn't take decisions. It can only ratify the agreement. To use these funds, sometimes there is some agreement between government of Montenegro and the EU, and then the Parliament ratifies the agreement. So that is the extent of our control.
And do you have parliamentary assistance programs from EU side?
No. Regarding the EU funds, no. Just the programs of cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
that we already mentioned, the fellowship program and cooperate and activities such as seminars, study visit, but regarding the EU funds, no.
Okay, and the next question, you mentioned the role of line committees, and could you tell more about their role in harmonization process? Who plays the main role? Committee on EU integration or line committees?
That's the key issue on EU path, and it's very complex, as I said. Unfortunately, European Integration Committee is not involved at all in harmonization process. That was, I mean, that had a logic. That was logical at the beginning of negotiation because the overall focus was on draft negotiation positions, and we actually didn't have time and capacities to deal with the harmonization process in that period by ourselves. But apparently, the time has shown that actually we are now we are not involved actually in we cannot monitor the harmonization process because that job is because line committees dealt with this issue. We as a committee do not have any information how actually that works because we do not get any feedback from them. According to the rules of procedure, once draft law enter at the committee, together with other issue on the draft law level, the issue of the alignment with the EU law, it will be discussed before it goes to the plenary. So we will talk about this tomorrow, maybe from the side on behalf of European Integration Committee. But there is different views on this issue. There is opinion that line committee do this in accordance with the rule of law, and that's it. And there is opinion that we should do it better.
I think here we could give our personal opinions as staffers. So this is the opinion of the staff of the committee. Underline. If you ask the MPs, maybe they will say something different. But what we think and what we recommend, so me personally, I wouldn't recommend this model of EU committee not being involved in the legislation, because every line committee deals with the substance of the legislation they have the mandate for. So the EU alignment it will not be a side thing, but it will be not less important, but it will be less important. It will not be the core thing they address. Yeah. So there needs to be a committee that will pay attention only to this. And the only way to have this is to have the EU Integration Committee doing that. So the line committees can focus on the substance of the law, and the EU committee can deal with whether it's aligned to the EU legislation or not. Also, what the parliament, so if you think strategically and in the long term, maybe we were making ad hoc decisions. So if you think in the long term, so we can say that 10 years have passed since we opened the negotiations, and we came to the position that we say, okay, are capacities of the administration, Parliament administration, to assess the alignment with of the draft laws with the EU acquis. We don't have big capacities, so we need to improve capacity. So you cannot have this. So from the day one, you need to build these capacities. So whether you will, so our recommendation would be maybe to have a special unit, 2, 3 people who will deal only with this, who will get trained, who will have the practice, and then 10 years, or hopefully in your case, much shorter, you will be able to say, okay, the Parliament, which is the main legislative body, has great capacities to assess the alignment with the EU legislation. So our position is a bit, this is not a good position to be in, honestly, from the side of the administration. So we would like to tell you now that 10 years since the negotiations have started, we have at least 3, 4 people who are very proficient, who deal only with the EU harmonization. And we, as the legislative body, we now depend on the government. So what the government did is they had in the Ministry of European Affairs, they had the Office for Legal Harmonization. So every draft law that is adopted by the government has this assessment, or should have this assessment. And there is, so those are also the people who started from the scratch. They didn't have previous experience in EU legislation harmonization. So they started from the beginning. It was young people with enthusiasm, with legal background, educational background, who got trained, who got experience exchange with Croatians, with other member states who did this process, and now have capacities to assess this for the whole government. So they sign whether the statement that says that the draft law is aligned or is not aligned to the EU legislation. We don't have these capacities, so we rely on the government. So don't do that. Build your capacities from the day one. So how? Whether it will be the separate office, or because our colleagues, even now, when you say to the line committee, so every committee, we don't have big administration. So if you say to the people now, you also have to assess the alignment with EU legislation, they have headaches. And there is a big revolution. No, you want to give us more job to do. It's normal, it's natural. So in order to avoid this, think about it from the beginning. So either have a team who will do this, or organize it in a way that suits your parliament, but don't come to the position that you say we don't have capacities to assess the alignment of the legislation. Don't do that. Don't repeat our mistake.
Thank you. It's very useful advice. And what do you recommend, to concentrate on the level on EU integration committee or on the level of line committees?
Both.
Both. Okay.
The model which involve both, so line committees and European Integration Committee. Maybe line committees to assess the alignment, and then to inform the European Integration Committee on this, and then European Integration Committee to discuss just whether these provisions are in line with EU law or not. Because, for instance, we have situation that draft law adopted at the committee level passed to the plenary, and then during the plenary, MPs introduced their amendments. And we have the issue of what's happening with the amendments when regarding the alignment with the EU law. So the office, Maria mentioned the Office on Governmental Law, which deals with the alignment. Discuss on draft law, but once the law is adopted, you probably at that moment you will have completely different law in comparison the one who entered to the parliament. So it's very complex issue, and we actually really recommend you to try to find a model which involves both the line and the EU integration.
You will also face one problem which we are facing now. So I don't know if in Ukrainian parliament, the MPs have this practice of proposing draft laws. Yeah, they do. So for us, it was mostly government, but now in this convocation, political forces changed. So now 50% of the legislation, more or less 50%, is proposed by the MPs. And now we face this, we didn't think about it before. Now it's becoming a headache, because when MPs introduce draft legislation, they don't have the obligation, according to the rules of procedure, to do this assessment of whether the law is aligned, the draft law is aligned to the EU legislation or not. So they just say, it doesn't have to be aligned, so they write one or two sentences and for them it's covered. But for the administration and for the overall system, it's not good, because you don't have the assessment. So you can believe the MPs or not, they can know or they cannot know. So MPs are not experts for every field, and they introduce also there should be somebody who should check, who should do this assessment. So if you have internal capacities in the parliament, then you can make the system so that internal capacities of the parliament can check this. Because for us, MPs do not have a lot of support. They don't have they don't have a parliamentary assistance. So the entire, like the MPs from one political party, maybe 20 of them rely on 2 or 3 people in their political offices in the parliament. So I don't see how they can even do the assessment. It's very difficult. So there needs to be some form of, some mechanism that can check this for so now we don't have the system of how to check the MPs, and like Maria mentioned, amendments. So they can amend laws, they can maybe introduce amendments which will impact this thing that is aligned to the EU. So they can change the law in the procedure, and there's no way you can control it. You cannot say don't introduce the amendment. If it's voted, it's voted. So that's why we said the downside of internal capacities need to be there. And in that case, you have more strategic control of the process. Now we always have the big question mark, whether it's aligned or it's not aligned. We can only do that after it's adopted.
And of course, you always have to, let's say, raise awareness that once we became the EU member state, that will actually become our daily work. So we should use this negotiation process and this pre-accession period to get prepared ourselves, and not to think about the capacities after joining to the EU, but that's how things go here and probably in Ukraine.
And I think in EU member states, when we ask the colleagues now, what did you do? Did you assess the MPs law? No.
Yeah, that's
most of them
true.
will say no. And we expect, like EU member state, now they're going to give us the perfect model, which we can't know. So everybody will have these problems. So I think this is why it's useful to talk about even the negative sides and what we did. Maybe we didn't, not that we did wrong, but we didn't maybe think of at times, so you can fix it and you don't have the same problems. And then for you, the problem will be something else. Then you will teach somebody else not to do this. So that's why we're emphasizing this, because EU member states even don't have the solution for this. They didn't even think about it.
Yeah, because for instance, in previous case, previous candidate countries, they have on governmental level, they have office that dealt with this issue, but this office depends on the capacities of actually European Commission. So they actually work together, and for example, for instance, they didn't have any draft law introduced by MPs, so they have no problems. No draft law introduced by MPs, no need to get national law in line with EU law, no problem. But now when you have situation that you have to do that, nobody knows how to do that. There is no lesson learned from previous period.
Thank you. It was a very useful answer, because, you know, we are now at the beginning of the process. So yeah, it would be very useful. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I guess that tomorrow we will have more time for questions and for discussion. So I would like to say thank you. Your experience is valuable, and see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot for this presentation and for this interesting discussion.